The implications of unrestricted access to the digital world for children during their most formative years. The digital landscape is teeming with both opportunities for growth and grave dangers, and society's collective nonchalance about exposing children to this uncharted wilderness is a dissonant failure to apply our understanding of child development to modern realities. How did we get here? Humanity's rapid technological advancements have far outstripped the evolution of our cultural, ethical, and psychological frameworks. Tools that were initially lauded for their potential to democratize knowledge, like smartphones and the internet, quickly became ubiquitous without a corresponding societal reckoning of their implications. The digital revolution arrived so quickly and thoroughly that many parents, educators, and policymakers failed to question its impact in real time. What started as occasional screen time transformed into constant digital presence. This normalization blinds society to the gravity of exposing young, impressionable minds to the vastness of the online world. In many households, the digital device has become a de facto babysitter due to economic constraints, societal expectations, and the perceived need for children to keep up in a hyper-connected world. These devices often offer convenience, entertainment, and even education, but at what cost? Science and psychology clearly show that children are neurologically vulnerable. Their brains are malleable and hyper-responsive to stimulation. Excessive exposure to screens, social media, and unregulated content risks dysregulating emotional development, attention span, and cognitive growth. Identity and moral frameworks are still forming. A child immersed in the chaos of the internet with its unchecked extremities, violence, misinformation, hyper-consumerism, is at risk of forming a fragmented sense of self or a distorted understanding of human interaction. Allowing unrestricted access during these crucial developmental years is akin to putting a child in a freefall without a parachute, trusting that they will somehow figure out how to land. Just as we shield children from physical environments unsuitable for their age, like war zones or dangerous streets, shouldn't we extend this principle to the digital sphere? Subjecting them to unregulated exposure is a passive abdication of our responsibility to ensure their safety. Children cannot meaningfully consent to participating in the digital world, as they lack the maturity to comprehend its risks. Yet by placing devices in their hands, we are tacitly consenting on their behalf, often prioritizing convenience over their long-term well-being. The algorithms and platforms that dominate the internet are not neutral. They are designed to capture attention and often manipulate emotions for profit, leaving children especially vulnerable to exploitation and ideological grooming. If we, as a collective, recognize this as a crisis, then addressing it requires both individual responsibility and societal reform. 1. Parental and community education. Equip caregivers with tools and knowledge to manage and moderate children's digital exposure. Encourage community-driven conversations about the impact of technology on child development. 2. Regulatory oversight. Governments and tech companies must work together to enforce stricter age-based content regulations. Develop platforms with ethical safeguards that prioritize child safety over profit. 3. Cultural shift. Re-evaluate the normalization of digital ubiquity for children. Advocate for alternatives, such as fostering outdoor play, creative hobbies, and human connection. Treat screen time as a privilege, not a default, and implement it in ways that align with developmental science. 4. Educational reform. Schools should teach digital literacy and critical thinking to help children navigate the online world responsibly. Sending children into the digital wild aptly illustrates the stakes of this issue. As stewards of the future, we must reconsider the societal apathy toward exposing vulnerable young minds to a reality they cannot yet fully comprehend or navigate. At its core, this is not just about children's rights, but about how seriously we take our collective responsibility for nurturing and protecting the next generation. That the behaviors and characteristics of Generation Z, or any generation, are not spontaneous phenomena. They are, in essence, a collective creation. The environments we've constructed, the values we've perpetuated, and the technologies we've introduced have all coalesced to shape their development. While it's tempting to blame them for perceived flaws, the deeper truth is that we, as a society, bear the responsibility for cultivating the conditions in which they were formed. Gen Z reflects the cumulative impact of decisions made by prior generations, both consciously and unconsciously. The digital environment they were born into was not of their choosing. Smartphones, social media, and 24/7 connectivity became the fabric of their reality, exposing them to unprecedented amounts of information, comparison, and influence. Did we pause to consider the developmental effects of placing these tools in their hands at a young age? Were ethical boundaries drawn before platforms optimized for addiction and engagement took hold? The narratives and values promoted by society play a role in shaping identity. Gen Z has been inundated with conflicting messages. They've been told they can be anything in a hyper-individualistic culture, yet they've also been thrust into a world that demands collective action on crises like climate change and inequality. Social media glorifies authenticity while simultaneously rewarding curation, leaving them navigating a paradoxical reality. They inherited an economic system rife with inequality, housing unaffordability, and student debt, alongside an escalating climate crisis. The systems designed by prior generations placed them in a world of instability, breeding frustration and disillusionment. Many parents, motivated by love but also fear, veered toward either overprotective or hands-off parenting styles. Overprotection sometimes stifled resilience and independence. Excessive reliance on screens and digital tools as a substitute for engagement left gaps in emotional and social development. This generation grew up in a world where borders are porous in terms of ideas, trends, and conflicts. They are bombarded with global issues, often without the tools to contextualize or address them, leading to anxiety and a sense of powerlessness. All Gen Z is not an anomaly. They are the inevitable outcome of the collective trajectory we've been on. To critique them without reflecting on the systems that shape them is to miss the deeper issue. We normalize dysfunction. From toxic workplaces to performative activism, we modeled behaviors and systems that were often inconsistent, hypocritical, or unsustainable. We deferred responsibility. We trusted technology to solve societal problems, governments to enact necessary reforms, and schools to fill in developmental gaps, leaving the next generation to navigate the fallout. We celebrated instant gratification. The rise of consumerism and the now culture has contributed to an erosion of patience, depth, and perseverance across generations. Accountability versus blame. The distinction here is important. Blame is unproductive. Pointing fingers at one generation or another perpetuates division. Accountability recognizes that we are all participants in this system. The flaws and virtues of Gen Z are the culmination of a collective story. The focus, then, should not be on fixing them, but on addressing the root causes. Challenge the structures, economic, educational, digital, that have failed to serve human flourishing. Younger generations often emulate the behaviors and priorities of their elders. If we model depth, resilience, and connection, they will follow suit. Equip them with critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to discern amidst the chaos of modernity. Healing comes from understanding. Engaging in honest, empathetic conversations can bridge divides and foster mutual growth. Gen Z, like every generation, carries both wounds and potential. By shifting our perspective from critique to co-creation, we can focus on building a society where future generations inherit not just our mistakes, but also our willingness to confront and transform them. The key is realizing that no generation is isolated. We are all threads in the same tapestry. If we address the deeper roots, fear, disconnection, and misplaced priorities, we may yet weave something stronger, more unified, and more just.